Hey, I'm Don Amero, and this is Through the Fire, a podcast about overcoming adversity, reframing misfortune, and celebrating courage. On this show, you're going to meet some really incredible people who have been through some heavy stuff, but they've come through the other side. And the hope is that you're encouraged and inspired by the words that you hear. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Through the Fire 2023. It's been a time for all of us as we've come into this new year. And I feel like if you're a new listener or if you've been listening all along, we haven't given a lot of context behind why I wanted to do this show. And so today I've asked my friend and producer, Sarah Burke, to come on with me today. And Sarah has been a tremendous support. I'm the face and the voice of this thing at most of the time. But the truth of it is that, and I've often said this, is it takes a village to do these things. And Sarah has been one who's, I would say, worked more than me on this whole project.
Stop.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the administration of getting this stuff and stuff that I'm terrible at, as you know. And, my manager, Lori Brown, she's basically like the one who I go to every day to say, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And with this podcast, you've been the one that we've all leaned on to kind of see this sort of come to life. And so all that to say, so Sarah Burke is with me today, and we're going to kind of get into a little bit about sort of the reason why this is. And kind of maybe where we want to go with this podcast, and I guess also in the end, just tell you a little bit more about ourselves.
Yeah, and Happy New Year, by the way. So why don't we start there? Did you get time to unplug?
I did. Sort of. I got 3 kids, as everybody knows. If you don't know, I've got 3 kids. They're age 10, 7, and 3. If you've got kids, you know what it's like. It's full on from the sun up till sometimes long after sundown, especially these days. And so it was full on family time. I finished my last show of 2022 on December 17th, my big annual Christmas show. And then basically it's just been full on kid life, and it's been great. But also, we are so glad that school started yesterday for us here, yeah. And I think we all desire. My kids can't really articulate this, but we all desire that routine, sort of getting back into a pattern of living, and here we are, and so yeah. So I did relax, sometimes a little too much, but I'm happy to get back to it. What about you? Did you enjoy your downtime? Did you have any?
I would say that this podcast is one of my children, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
I am very similar to you that was craving the routine. So I'm currently doing an evening radio show. It starts at 6 p.m. Eastern. But over the holiday time, I filled in during the day while everyone else took vacation. So I was doing 12 to 5. So it just kind of threw the routine into a different place. But luckily, my boyfriend who lives out of town came into town, and we would do dinners together and all that because he was off for a few weeks there, and we made that work. So downtime, but a different busy than my usual. I do a lot of freelance work during the day with podcasts and all sorts of stuff. But so I'm happy to not have to go anywhere until 6 o'clock again this week, which I think is kind of like your kids' routine. So
right, yeah, it's a bit the same. And by the way, just so you know, Sarah is one of the hardest workers, I think, in the scene. When I think of just music and entertainment in general, you got the radio show, you've got a number of podcasts that you're involved with, this one, and there's a few others. And I just feel like sometimes, how do you manage it all? How do you manage to do all the things? Is it because these are your babies and that's where you're investing all your energy into, just like I would as a father?
I guess so. You know more about this than most people would, but I took a big risk, big leap of faith last year and left a full-time job. I used to work at SiriusXM and was managing the Canadian music department. I loved the job so much. It was so much fun. But there was more work than me having 5 jobs right now, I would say, even though they're all little freelance snippets. Managing that job, I could tell with the resources we had available was not good for me by the end of it. I don't know if the working from home led to that. I think I was trusted with a lot of things, and the more that people know they can rely on you, the more that they will. I think that was part of it too. So, that's kind of, you put your time into what you care about. And I decided in that job that I cared about everything, which is why I was working myself to the ground. So now it's on my own time. It's a little more spread out. Things are on my schedule. So maybe that's why it's more attainable right now. But you do have to I'm a routine person. I love going to the gym every morning. And when I come home, I take about an hour to have a bite to eat, have a morning coffee, whatever. And then it's, okay, what's my first thing I'm tackling today? So it's much the same as if you're working a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
First thing in the morning, you look at what you got to do. For you, it's usually a kid drop off, I would assume it starts with.
It's usually like
Right?
a 6:30 a.m. wake up and run from then on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's similar. It's just, carving out time for each task. That's all it is.
Just so you know, too, out there listening, Sarah and I met through her work at SiriusXM, and when you left SiriusXM, you were on my radar. I thought I should give her a call, and then as I was calling you just to say hey, if you remember this, and I just said, hey, this wasn't my intention in our conversation at all, and then I just said, wait a second, like I've got this podcast. You're now no longer with SiriusXM. Any chance you'd want to help me out do this thing? Because I don't know a whole lot about podcasting, but I knew I had this desire to do this thing, and you said yes, and you jumped on.
And I was honored that you asked me. I think what I learned from my work at Sirius was I'm really good at project management and seeing something through from beginning to end.
Honestly, it's been the gift that we've had here is that you've been able to keep things moving and just keep things organized. And even today, as we were coming on to do this talk, I was like, Sarah, I need a link. You're like, I already sent a link. Here's another one. And then even just managing how to set this up, like I'm leaning on you to walk me through this. And I mean, you're just so gifted in this area that I'm so glad you did say yes. And I think in some ways it's solidified our working partnership and the way that we do work. And you're very gracious to me in my crazy life at times. And I think it's working. I'm really glad that we're doing this together.
Yeah, I'm so happy you asked me. So, I mean, we wanted to share a little bit about how you came up with the idea. I know that you had some lyrics in a song.
Refined.
But that's not where this idea started. Like, what made you think, hey, I should host a podcast?
Because I'm an artist and I'm a singer-songwriter, and I've always been a heart on my sleeve kind of guy. I've told a lot of my story over the years, and for me, I've been through some things in my life where family divorce, my mom getting involved with somebody who was really toxic, abusive, emotionally and physically abusive to my mother. And having gone through that as a young man and watched, literally having physical fights with this person in my mom's life, that led me down a path that I realized, I looked around. I'm giving you the Coles Notes version of this story, but I remember at that season of my life, I was about 13 years old, and I looked around my neighborhood and I saw my friends who were kind of in similar brokenness in their homes, alcohol abuse, addictions, those kinds of things in their homes. And I saw them all kind of falling back into the same patterns. Like some of them were getting into gang life and some of them were getting into drugs. And I just kept seeing it like perpetuating this sort of way of living that they were brought up to know. And I just said to myself, I wanted something better from me in my future, and so immediately I plugged into other things that was more beneficial, like arts and sports, and that sort of became my therapy. And I didn't realize it back then, but that's what I did. And so this idea of like sharing that part of my story was really.
I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this.
Well, yeah, I get maybe this is part of the thing that I haven't been as open about this as I like to think that I have been, but that's been a big part of my story where it was like family destruction really, and my brothers all they're all great guys, but they all sort of fell into somewhat of the same sort of living conditions in a way, and I just said, I want something better for my life, and I'm gonna try to break beyond that, break the chains, as they say, and all this to say that my folks were really loving and kind, but they themselves were really caught up in this cycle of life where they were really trapped, or so
products
they thought.
Of that same pattern.
Yeah, and so for me, I've ever since I started playing and performing music, I've been very vulnerable to share that side of my story and recognizing that I may not be the most unique guitar player or the most unique singer or the most unique lyricist, but what makes me the most Don Amero is my story, right? And so I've always felt like that's the thing I need to share and be the most unique about, is that if I can share that part of it, that's something that nobody else has been in my shoes. So if I can reveal that all the way as an artist within the context of a concert, that's the unique experience of when people, come and see me and share some time with me. And so all that to say, is this whole podcast was born out of that, because I realized that everybody's been through things. Everybody's been through sort of, a fire of some sort. And I thought maybe there's a way we can highlight those stories and bring those forth. And I also love the when you've been through that fire. For me, I always want to know, how did you get through it? What brought you through the other side? And that's what kind of launched this thing. And this has been years in the making. In my mind, that's at the start, and then finally, kind of we hit the ground running last year.
Yeah, and I think so many musicians need to hear what you just said. Like, my superpower is being me, Don Amero, in the concert. It might not be the best lyrics, it might not be the perfect guitar tuning, but here we are, and I'm just being real. Because you can tell when a musician is not in their own skin and they're putting on a front, right?
You're gonna hear me say this probably a few times over the next little while, because this is a phrase that literally just came to me the other day. There's something about when strength meets vulnerability, and that becomes what we share with each other, even in friendships. It doesn't necessarily have to be as performers, but I think when strength meets vulnerability, there's this beautiful convergence that happens where people are truly themselves, because the strength is I'm brave enough to show these parts of who I am, and I don't mean strong as in like physically strong. Maybe that's part of it, but the other part of it is just like I'm brave enough to step forward and say, these are the things that I've struggled with, these are the things that I've battled, and even to say that I'm still in the midst of this battle, but I know I'm taking steps forward. And I think that's always been a bit of my persona. I don't know if that comes from family life or what I've been through. It must. I'm imagining, like I've always said, that we are the sum of our experiences, right? Where we basically how we see the world through, first of all, through our parents' eyes and through the relationships and the people that we surround ourselves with. That's kind of what we become in a way, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And, I think even with what I just put myself through in the last year with like leaving a job, there was a loss of identity that came with that, right? Because your experience day to day, shapes you. So when all of a sudden the place or the thing that you spend the most time on is different, just the same way, like with family even, you're going to change. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
So yeah, even though I was like super scared to make that move, like here we are, I'm 2 months away from like the 1 year anniversary of me leaving that job. And I'm very proud of myself. None of this was easy. Yeah. And I think you would say a lot of the same things about some of the things you've been through. There's a lot of risk taking, but that actually makes you stronger, learning lessons all the time and progress, right? And who you want to be.
What's the title you would give yourself in the context of the work that you do?
So I'm definitely a host. In some aspects, I'm a chase producer. In some aspects, I'm an executive producer. So like, the work I've been doing, for example, with the Jann Arden radio show and podcast, I'm a chase producer and co-host on that one. I host my own show on Indie 88. I host and executive produce my own podcast. I do some executive production on your podcast. So it's all content creation and production at the end of the day. Would
you say you're your own boss in all this? Like you get
yeah.
To okay. So the reason why I was getting at that was because, like I remember when I first jumped in, it was about 15 years ago when I started doing music full time.
You're your own boss too.
I am. Well, I like to think so most of the time. But no, really, I feel like I did sort of shed that like 9-to-5 life. And like, if I'm going to do this, I'm taking the reins. I think at the beginning it was like, do everything, say yes to everything, take on everything. And I learned over time, like my most valuable asset is that time, right? Like whether I give of myself or I'm taking time from something else. And so it was like, as my children entered the world, it was like my time became way more valuable, and thus I became more valuable. And so every time I had another kid, it's like my stock went up. But I'm done at 3. But I think entrepreneurs, when they first jump into something like whatever it is that they're jumping into, there is that season of yes, where everything kind of has to just be like, I'll take on anything.
I'm in that right now
yeah.
still.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if that's where you are, because you are so busy. Do you feel like you're doing all the things you want to do, or do you feel like you're doing some of the things that you kind of feel like, this may be a hard question to ask, but do you feel like, are you doing some things that you feel like you have to do?
I think that's a given in a transition career-wise, because you don't want to find yourself in a place where you can't pay your mortgage, for example, right? And looking at the numbers, which funny enough, I just kind of did because it was year end, I was like, wow, like I almost made about the same amount of money. That's crazy to me. So first up, it's like taking care of yourself and the things you need day to day.
Yeah.
You might have to say yes to a few things that, are not the best use of your time, but to keep doors open.
Right.
Even like my Women in Media podcast, of course, I'm working on how I can make that have a little more return on the investment of time.
Yeah.
But without doing that podcast, which was just a little passion project, Jann Arden wouldn't have wanted me to fill in for this maternity leave, right? So like you have to think of like an investment in time can still somewhere down the road be a return on the investment. That's what's interesting.
Just last night, speaking to a friend of mine about sometimes if you take the time to just step back and look at the threads of connection to things, it's kind of incredible if you really just slow it down a little bit and kind of go, where does this lead? How did that connect to that? And I think about those pieces sometimes. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday about, meeting Pam and connecting with my wife. So we've been married for 18 years. Yeah,
I told my boyfriend to go home after 5 days. See you soon.
18 very long years. And like even the connecting to her and us finding each other and our kids being here, and the most beautiful gift I've ever had in my life is them. And I just take time and to take stock. You said a couple of minutes ago that you kind of paused and looked at the year and doing the year-end stuff. And I think people need to do that. Make sure you carve time out to reflect. I think it's important. Even
the threads of how you and I met. I think we met at that studio session you did for SiriusXM. So at the time it was for SiriusXM Country. And I think about the time that we spent, and obviously we had a connection that, saw each other at festivals over the next few years. And then there were more interviews where we got more one-on-one time. That has led us to us sitting in this, we're both in different provinces and working on a podcast together. So it's funny, and that just even leaves sort of a lesson in, I think the right word is kindness, the way that you carry yourself throughout your career, throughout your life could impact things later too.
Right. Absolutely. I think when I reflect back to that time, I remember kind of walking into that studio going, SiriusXM is going to come and chat with me and hang out with me. I was like, why is this? We were with Strut Entertainment at the time, and Strut was like, Samantha at Strut is just like, she's a bulldog. Yeah. She's so fierce, and she's so, she knows what she wants and how to help an artist, and was paramount for us to kind of take the next steps. And I think, they set up all that stuff for us. And even some of the other interviews I've done, I'm like, I don't know if these people know who I am, but at the same time, it's like that shouldn't negate whether or not you have the value to be in that room and have those conversations. And I've mentioned this on this show a number of times. Like my attitude for a long time has been like, whenever I walk into a space or I'm in a space, I want to serve. If I can use my time to serve anybody who's giving up their time, that's really the best use of all of our time, really.
Well, and thinking back to that too, I was very new in the country space at the time where you and I met. At the same time being like, who the hell am I to be doing these country interviews, right? So it's funny what we were both going through at that time.
Yeah, for sure. With this podcast, we've got plans for to carry on. I hope this is okay to share. If you think it's okay to share, I'm going to share it anyways.
You're your own boss. You share what you want.
I am my own boss. This podcast has been funded by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Manitoba Arts Council here in Manitoba. And we've had funding to do this thing up till now. And initially, my plan was to have this carry on, and we can do this for as long as we want and many years. But now we've used up that funding timing, but we want to just make a promise to you out there that are listening that we want to continue having these deep conversations with folks, and we'll make that happen, and hopefully you'll continue to come hang out with us and journey with us as we have a lot more in-depth conversations like this, and continue the thread, as we say.
I love your interview style, because you, regardless of who you're talking to, you make that person feel like a friend. And like, I know you said to me, this is your forte. Like, you got to give me some tips on this, like in the beginning.
Right.
And watching you go over the last 6 months from the first shoot, it's been really special, because it's funny how someone who hasn't had formal training on something is still so good at this particular skill.
Oh, that's good to hear, especially coming from you. For me, it really is that I like reading a little bit about the people I'm going to meet. Obviously, I want to have some context of who they are, and I'm thinking back to a few conversations we've had in the last 6 months, and some of them were somewhat new to me. Well, actually, that's not true. Most of them were friends. Most of them were people that I knew, but there was some of the stories where I thought I don't fully know the scope of this. So I was literally just sitting as a guest in their space and wanting and asking the questions, curious, and I come with a curiosity, and I want to go there, and I don't want to have the filter of what's the listener thinking in this moment, because I am the listener, and I want to ask the questions that I think would pop up if I was listening to this podcast, and that's really what I'm trying to embody. And the other thing, here I am talking my face off on this one, but as I don't like it when hosts take up the space. I really want to use this as an opportunity to really hear the story of the other. And so I've really sat back. I've listened to a number of podcasts, and it bugs me every time when the hosts are in there just sort of here's my thing, here's my thought, here's my ideas. And it's I didn't tune into this episode to hear your thoughts and ideas. I want to hear theirs,
It's so interesting that you say that too, because that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned in podcasting. When I download after this, the 2 tracks, one for you, one for me, I think we're going to be pretty equal in talking in this, and that's exactly what we were trying to accomplish. But when I download the 2 tracks for my Women in Media podcast, I can now see that I'm talking a lot less than I would have been a year ago, because I'm listening. I've learned a little more about listening. Right. I've even seen you in real time learning that lesson a bit too.
Yeah. It's definitely been a thing that I've been very conscious of, because some of the best and most popular podcasts in the world bother me because the hosts are talking too much. I still love the podcast because I love the hosts, but I feel for me, because of the content that we're trying to capture here, it really is about the story of others, and just allowing the space for that to happen. And also, one of the things that I'm learning in my life, literally right now, is space is okay. Slowing down, pause, and just having time to reflect. I used that word a little while ago. I'm not good at idle. I'm not good at
me neither.
I'm not good at space. I've always had trouble in group. When there's a group of, I've got this group of guys, we all hang out. I am by far the loudest and probably most obnoxious in the group, because it's as soon as it gets quiet, it's my mind's going, what's the next topic? Where do we go? What do we bring up here? And it's no, it's okay to just chill. Just breathe. And the reason why I'm saying this is because a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned it a while ago, my big Christmas show. And I said to the band before we went out, I kind of got us all together, and it was a big show. There's 16, 17 of us on the stage that night. And so I brought us all together, and I said, listen, you're all so incredible what you do. When we've prepared the music, I have no doubt that we'll be fine in. What I'm really concentrating on is the space in between. And I said, let's just embrace the quiet, embrace the pause, embrace the slowdowns in between, and don't feel like we have to rush. Because the last thing I want this night to be is one that we look back at and go, it just went by in a blink. Let's just really absorb all the moments. And literally since that day, I've been thinking about it every single day. Whenever there's a pause or a slowdown or an opportunity to, and actually my life right now feels like it's in that season of pause, slow down, which oftentimes for many artists, January, February tends to be that way. And I'm trying to just live in it and be in it and be present in the slowdown.
I feel that too. And, there's been some jobs I've interviewed for, or some opportunities that maybe you would say I'm chasing. And I'm really happy that I took the pauses and the time, because I think a lot of things that I almost got myself into wouldn't have been right. Even though to the average eye, like you just said, oh my God, you have like all these different things going on. You're a very busy person. I might have had more, you know?
Right.
And saying no to things that don't serve you is a skill in itself. Like it's hard to say no, especially like, you know, music is so hard. So many artists are just like clawing for the same piece of the pie right now, right?
Yeah.
So it can feel like you have to take up space all the time, or that you're going to be like, you know, I don't know.
Irrelevant if you're not making noise.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And the same applies to me here. But one thing I was thinking about in the pause and reflect before we get started with new guests, like we're actually going to record your first guest outside of your producer later this afternoon. But maybe we look back at, you know, the year that was, and was there, if I can play host and ask you a question for a second here.
Please do.
What was like one of the most defining moments of this podcast so far for you?
It happened a couple of times for sure. Like every episode has a real like moment where it hits me, kind of going, this person is being really vulnerable with me and really just sharing heartbreak, really. And it's hard not to be emotional in those moments because you're for momentarily going to that place with them. And so every time I have those conversations with people, I feel the weight of it as much as I can as a listener, you know? And again, my role in those moments is to just sit in it, you know, with them for that moment. And so for me, I think the first day we walked, because we filmed some episodes too, and we really wanted to make this sort of like a multifaceted audio visual experience for folks that want to kind of digest it in various ways, right? And I walked in and I saw my chairs. By the way, this is one of those chairs from the podcast. I got it in my house. I saw my chairs set up in the studio, and I saw the lights and I saw the cameras, and it was just like, this is happening. And it was a really proud moment for me that like, and the biggest thing is like the strength of this thing has been the people involved. It's not, you know, I know I've got an idea and I've got a voice, but it's been you, it's been Lori, it's been Landon, it's been Chris, it's been Alan Gray Eyes, it's been so many people who are behind, you know, Matt helping us on the audio side, which I still fully don't understand how that works, but it does work. But it's this team of people around that like is all moving the needle forward on this thing. It's not just me, you know. I think I'm one small piece of this puzzle that is making this work, and so that was a cool experience, walking in the first day and seeing this is actually going to work, you know. And like until you're doing it, you're like, is this going to work? And then it was I think one of the most pleasant and touching moments for me was actually sitting with Jeremy Dutcher. I've known Jeremy for a few years, and when Jeremy came to the studio, they came with this just lightness and openness and heart to a show that I think, you know, Jeremy wasn't fully aware of what we were doing, but
he kind of just said yes, knowing what Don Amero was about. Yeah,
I suppose, you know, and I think there was also a you know, Jeremy brings a presence, you know, with them, and I was really just moved by that. And I think that really was a defining moment, I think, in this podcast for me, because it felt like what we're doing has some value and worth. I often think about the entertainment value, because this is what this is, and what's going to keep the listener coming back. And I think it's moments like that where they can feel our hearts, I hope. And that's one of those episodes that if you go back and listen, I can't help but feel the heart of that one.
Jeremy had a calling to do something because of ancestry. I think it's crazy what has come of his music. And we should say, like, Jeremy is comfortable being they or he. He's very fluid, right? Yes. So we've both used different terms, and you know, we asked Jeremy about that as well, and even being like open to talking about that stuff too.
Well, and like we did on the podcast, right? I kind of went there, and I said, how, is this, you know, how because I remember when Jeremy walked in, I said, "Hey, brother, great to see you," and I hugged him, and I said, I remember I was like, "Hey," when you walked in, I said, "Hey, brother," and I said, you know, I immediately felt like, what did I say? I said, "Was that okay?" And he goes, felt pretty good to me. I was like, I just thought that was a really beautiful, just again, somebody who is embodying love. And another great conversation for me, only, not only because he's an iconic legend in Canada, but Fred Penner. And Fred was another one, I think, who said yes because Fred and I have crossed paths over the years. And I think Fred likes me and likes the work that I do. But Fred, too, I think didn't fully know what he was walking into. But to hear somebody who I've looked up to for a long time, from a young age, like most of us, to hear of the struggles and the battles that he's gone through in his life, and still is somebody who's so positive and just lovely to be around and so uplifting. Like anytime I've spent time with Fred, Fred's always made me feel better about who I am. I shared this story in the podcast. I think I remember one time Fred was at a little gathering, and I didn't know if he knew who I was, but I saw him standing there on his phone, looking a little bit lost at this Juno party, and I was like, "Hey, Fred, how you doing?" And he's like, "Much better now that you're here, Don." And I was just like, "You know who I am. He knows me." and I just those kinds of people on this podcast, everybody on this podcast, like you say, has been tremendous with being open to be vulnerable and also show their strength. And that's been the key to this whole thing.
Yeah, I think we kind of just got over a hump, if I may say. I think before we were looking for the fire, like in our booking. In
right.
our, who do we want when we're brainstorming guests?
Yeah.
And I think now we've come to realize that the truth is everyone has a fire.
Yep.
Everyone has a fire and something that they've had to work through or are working through.
Mm-hmm.
And now that Chase guest booking thing is more about who are the right people to feel comfortable enough and to have a conversation about said fire.
Yeah. We're looking for strength and vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking for, and I won't be ashamed to use that term as we move forward, because it is, when I look back at the people we've had on, that's what we've had is strength and vulnerability here.
Mm-hmm. And the best thing about the pandemic, hands down, has been this, we're sitting in a digital recording room right now. And that means that we can talk to anyone like across Canada, or maybe it's going to be someone in a different country. Who knows, right? So it's opened some doors.
Yeah, I think, and especially because, again, you set this up and you know how to make it work. It's great that we can do this and have it look and feel and sound really great. And I'm excited about 2023 and all that we have in store for us and for you out there as listeners. And we hope that you'll keep coming back and keep listening, because I know we've got some exciting guests right around the corner.
Do we want to tease your first guest of 2023 after me?
I don't mind doing that at all. I've been on the trail of Jessica Mitchell for a number of years. I've followed her career. I've been a massive fan of her music, and somebody I've never met in person until we had an opportunity to chat. And Jessica has inspired me in a lot of ways musically. And I'm just so excited that we finally did get a chance to sit down and chat. And we'll be sharing that interview with you very soon. As I always say, it takes a village to run things here at Through the Fire. And I want to thank my village. Executive producer, Sarah Burke. Administrators Lori Brown and Alan Greyeyes. Video and audio design by Chris Gaudry and his team at 44 Films. Feisty Creative for their design work. Social media support by Johnson Design Company. And last but far from least, I want to thank our technical producers, Matt Kundle and Evan Serminski from the Sound Off Media Company. I look forward to sharing more great conversations just like this one on the next Through the Fire. You see the light.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.